And yeah, I have to explain to people.
I do know that, but do I do that on my house? Probably not.
No.
I'm just
But
as
I
guilty.
definitely do it more often than others, I think.
I'm just as guilty.
Welcome, Andy Cox from Cox Inspections. Thanks for joining us for a podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
This is episode 3 of Selling Brevard, and we're going to be talking about inspections today because that's what Andy does. We'll just start off with the basics. How long do inspections normally take?
Typically around 2 hours, and it doesn't really matter how big or small the house is. About 2 hours is usually what I give it. Of course, if it's a huge house with a lot of different features, then it might go a little longer, but not much less than 2 hours.
Do you recommend buyers be there? Do you recommend agents be there?
A lot of times it's nice to have an agent there if it's one of those houses that there will be questions, but it's not really necessary. And for the buyers, it is really up to the buyer. If they're fairly comfortable with the process, it's not that big a deal. There are some buyers who need to see the process. They need to see the house, and that's okay too. The big thing we want to avoid is getting a lot of people congregated in the house and a lot of distractions.
Right. That makes sense. That way you can do your job peacefully and do it the correct way, right? Without 100 people asking you questions. So the best time for a buyer, in my belief, is at the end, is just to kind of summarize with you. That's what I always recommend. And then if they can't ever make it, because we deal with a lot of out-of-town buyers, you're always available by phone. So I always enjoy that you take the time to speak to them on their cell phone if they need questions answered or anything like that.
And that's one of the things I will commonly do if the buyer can't make it to the inspection, and if we find something really major, a roof leak or a bad plumbing leak or something like that, I don't mind calling them from the house and going over it with them and just give them a heads up so that they know that there's a major issue. But keep in mind that they do get a report, they do get pictures of things, and like you said, I'm always available by phone or by email to go over it. My philosophy is that my report should answer all those questions, and if it doesn't, then I answer my phone when it rings.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we talked about the distractions and not having a house full of people, because there's certain key areas of the house that there's a flow to your inspection. Can you kind of describe the key areas or the components of your home inspection?
Well, of course, there are the 4 big points of the house: the roof, the heating and air, electrical, and the plumbing. Those things, like I said, no matter the size of the house, those things are always there. And those are the important things. Those are the high dollar issues that might show up. So we always look at those things. If it's safe to do, I'll walk the roof, on top of the roof. If it's not safe, I'll at least be able to visualize everything that's there from the ground or from the ladder. And then getting into the attic to be able to see under the roof. A lot of times in the attic is where you see problems that have come up.
For example?
Like a roof leak,
Okay.
or structural problems, damage, things like that will show up. And then, of course, talking about having people around, the electrical system, a major part of the inspection is opening the electrical panel to be able to look at the wiring inside. And believe it or not, I've had people come up and want to touch. Of course, it's live electrical equipment, and you can't have people around when you're doing that. A lot of times people will bring their children, and you just have, a problem waiting to happen.
Sounds right. Okay.
So if somebody was to sell the house, I'm a seller, say, what do you think is important for a seller to do? Maybe partner with an inspector for a pre-listing inspection? Like, do you recommend that?
Actually, I do. Not many people take me up on it, but I've found that a lot of people are interested in seeing what their house is like, and they recognize the fact that wear and tear happens on their house, and they may not notice it. And there might be issues that can be easily repaired before they actually have a buyer come in. But yeah, the pre-listing inspection, I think, is a very good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Christine and I normally do a 4-point on each of our listings just to show that the house is insurable. But yeah, we haven't really dived into doing a pre-listing inspection, but maybe something we could add on in the future.
Could you walk us through like a typical inspection process? Where do you normally start, and then where do you normally finish?
Yeah, normally I start at the outside of the house. I look around all four sides, all around. One of probably the most important thing about a house is it protects you from the outside. So that building envelope, we want to make sure that there are no openings, there's no cracks, there are no problems with the the exterior walls, and then also the roof. The important thing is keeping moisture, keeping pests out. So that's where I start, and then I look at all the outside components, the air conditioning, the electric service lines that come to the house, and the meter, things like that. After going around the outside and taking lots of pictures, then I move inside, and I start out by looking at those major components again inside: the electrical, the air conditioning, the plumbing, the water heater, things like that. And then I'll go room to room, looking at floor covering, doors, windows, looking at proper installation of these things, and also how they work, to make sure that, doors are installed correctly and they actually open and close. Windows, an important part of bedrooms is having an operable window that can be used as an emergency exit. And looking at all those things, the electrical system, outlets that actually work, wall switches, trying to figure out what switches work, what light or whatever. That's all part of the process.
What are some common things that you find that, like the most common thing that you find during your inspections that is incorrect?
Honestly, it's kind of rare to find major issues, but little things that could have been addressed over time, like, for instance, caulking on windows,
Yes.
Things like that just haven't been kept up.
Well, most people don't know that you have to do that yearly.
Exactly, and that's one of those things, and yeah, I have to explain to people.
I do know that, but do I do that on my house? Probably not.
No.
I'm just
But
as
I
guilty.
definitely do it more often than others, I think.
I'm just as guilty. Same thing with like changing the air conditioning filter, or a lot of people aren't familiar with the water heater needs to be flushed annually. At my house, I haven't done it in probably 3 years, but I know it should be done. I know it should be done. Those things are the most common. Once in a while, I'll find a roof leak, or a lot of times I'll see signs of a leak.
Yeah.
That may have happened in the past that aren't happening now. And a lot of people don't realize that probably the best time to do a home inspection is when it is storming out. Just because if there's a roof leak, you're going to find it, hopefully. But yeah, a lot of the most common things are simple things that can be fixed pretty easily.
Okay.
I think Andy has told me about like where they've re-roofed a home, but maybe covered up roof vents or things like that, where they've needed to come back in and he's re-inspected to see that they've re-roofed properly and re-vented properly.
I just actually had one the other day where they renovated the house. The house was built in the 60s. And the seller was not aware that they had no attic access.
Okay.
They had covered up the attic access, and they, to their credit, they actually had somebody come over and cut a hole so that I could get up into the attic.
That was very nice.
And ground fault protection in some of these older homes.
Yeah. The electrical in this area, it's so common to see houses built in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, where there are electrical issues. The GFI outlets are a very simple thing, but can be very, very important. We see a lot of houses with aluminum wiring that I don't care who says it's okay, it's not. It needs to be addressed. And that's one of those things that can be a very expensive issue. So the buyer needs to be aware of it.
Yeah, I had one buyer bought a home, but the seller credited them or paid for the electrical. We were able to close on time because they had already paid for the electrician to come and do the lumicons, the tips. So at least it got remedied, but it was after closing.
Yeah.
Andy, can you describe some of the tools or the technology that you use for your whole home inspections?
Probably the biggest thing I use is I have several infrared cameras. The infrared detects differences in temperature in a material. And so if you have a leak or an air leak, it will show up very quickly. And so many people have those stains on the ceiling that they don't remember what it's from. And it might be an active leak, it might not be. I can tell very quickly if it is.
Okay.
The other thing I use is a moisture meter that it actually uses technology that's like a sonar. It sends a signal and it bounces back off the material, and it can tell by the difference what amount of moisture is in the material. And so we use those things, obviously, to try and detect any moisture that's present.
Very cool.
And permit searches, you do those as well for certain components of the house as well?
Mainly for the roof, but
Okay.
yeah, I always look for permits for the house. Like I said, for the roof, insurance companies now are almost demanding to actually have a copy of the permit to prove when the roof was redone. They don't just take my word for it anymore. But I also look for permits. It's always nice to see a house that's been renovated and they have a whole list of permits to be done. And that tells me that the work was done by a licensed professional rather than, the owner's uncle.
Yeah, handyman special.
Yeah. And in fact, I just did a reinspection on a house where the water heater was replaced because it was over 15 years old. It was done by a handyman, and he did it wrong. When I did the reinspection, I told him that they had to redo certain things, and so they were spending more money.
Yep.
So what type of reports do you normally generate?
Well, the state of Florida standards of practice requires me to give you a report of the inspection, and it actually lists out what has to be present. My report, I use a reporting software that allows me to put in comments and to embed pictures in the report, and probably 99% of the time I can produce the report in a PDF format and then email it to the buyer. I also send a copy of it to the buyer's agent, unless every once in a while I have a buyer that doesn't want it to go to their agent for whatever reason. but the report belongs to the buyer.
Correct. And then you also do 4 points in wind mitigations as well.
I do, and I personally include those in the inspection process. A lot of inspectors, probably most inspectors, do not do those separate reports. That's an additional service and additional charge.
Additional fees, yeah. We already talked about how you kind of communicate with your buyers when we get them hired for you. So what parts of the report do you recommend the buyers send to the insurance agents?
I recommend never, ever, 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 ever sending the entire inspection report to anyone.
Exactly.
The insurance company, the lender. There's a lot of information there that they just don't need to have.
Right.
And I have had buyers ignore my advice and send the inspection report to their insurance agent, and then an underwriter come back and demand that they have a licensed electrician do this and a licensed plumber do that, all things that really didn't need to be done, and it wound up being a real pain, but also a lot of cost additional.
Of course. So the only thing that gets sent to an insurance agent is the wind mitigation and the 4 point.
Correct.
I normally do it for my buyers so they don't muck it up, right?
Yeah.
That's why I like getting the reports back. If I'm representing a buyer, I send it to 3 different insurance agents. I tell them don't send the report, and then they get, quotes back. So
yeah.
That way we don't have those issues.
Right.
And I encourage the buyer and the realtor, if the insurance company has a question, every once in a while they'll have a question about something.
They can call you.
Yeah, instead of calling the realtor and the realtor calls me and then it goes back and forth, just tell them to call me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Every once in a while they'll want to see the original photograph, or they'll want to ask a question about a certain thing. And it's just so much easier to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Andy, can you tell us what certification or license you hold, and then how you maintain that license, what trainings you have to have or CEUs every year?
Yeah. Now, I've been doing this for 18 years. Actually, before the state of Florida required a license for home inspectors. So, in 2012, they passed the licensure requirement, and I had to sit for a proctored exam and do all that. There are certain requirements that are made of home inspectors, but one of the biggest things, we have to relicense every 2 years.
Okay. We
have to have 14 hours of continuing education during that 2-year time. Now, I also belong to the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors, and their requirements for me to maintain my certification there are 24 hours of CEUs every year.
Okay.
And so I wind up having a lot of continuing education, seminars and online classes and different things like that. So, and these online classes are on all kinds of different topics. One thing that the state does require in that 2-year period, licensure, I have to have a 3-hour class on roofs and wind mitigation training.
Okay.
It's more than a nurse. I used to be a nurse, and
to
keep my license up, I think it's 24 or 26 hours every 2 years. He's got to do 24 every year.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the nice thing is they do allow me to repeat classes. So, as new technology or new thinking or new materials or whatever else, I can update my training. But they also have, for instance, basic electrical inspections and advanced topics and all kinds of different things.
Very cool. So can you just tell us of maybe an instance where you've had buyers and this inspection report that you're providing them, it has helped them make an informed decision to either move forward or maybe save them a lot of money and just release and cancel the contract?
I like to think every client has
Yes.
benefited. I can tell you a kind of a horror story that turned out really well. And this involves a new construction.
Okay.
And you haven't asked the question, but yes, a new construction home definitely needs to have an inspection.
Yes.
We were going to follow up with those questions. But yes, we are firm believers in new construction needs an inspection.
And what happened was I was doing an inspection for a gentleman that lived out of state. He was having a house built, and I got there for the pre-drywall inspection. The HVAC, the electrical, plumbing was all done, all in the walls, everything was done. They were waiting for the county to sign off so that they could start putting drywall up, and none of this stuff would ever be visible again. And when I walked in, the building contractor, the builder was standing there, and I looked up, and it was a 2-story home. I looked up, and the first thing I saw was the plumber had cut 2 joists in the second floor to be able to fit the bathtub drain in the master bath.
Oh my goodness.
And I looked at it. I started taking pictures. The builder looked up and made a few comments that weren't very nice, and it got fixed.
Right.
If that had not happened, and I like to think that probably the buyer might not have seen it, because builders like to have the buyers go through a pre-drywall walkthrough.
Yeah, but how do they know?
And probably would not have noticed it.
That's
and,
amazing.
I'm pretty sure that the first time they filled that tub, it probably would have ended up on the first floor.
Whew. That's a great save.
And the builder wound up having to spend about, I think he said $30,000 having new trusses put in.
Yeah, because they're not cheap.
No.
Wood's not
and especially
cheap.
after it's all done.
Wow. That
Yeah.
was a great save.
So, and the buyer was very happy. He wound up getting a great home.
Right.
And yeah, that was.
So
That was a good
the amount that it costed him to get an inspection far exceeded what you found if he wouldn't have done it. I mean,
Yeah.
had
Oh,
the tub fallen through,
yeah.
that would have costed him thousands over an inspection, which costed him a few $100.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Wow. That is a great success story.
It really is.
And there are others with roof leaks and things like that
Sure.
nobody would have ever noticed if I hadn't been crawling through the attic and
Right.
seen it.
Well, I've seen a few videos online where they drywalled it's an exterior window, and they drywalled the interior. So on the outside you see the window, but on the inside you just see wall.
Right.
And it's like, how did that even happen? What kind of drywall guy just slapped some mud over that and kept
It
going?
happens all the time. Same thing with these houses where they build a bedroom in the garage.
Right.
And they just drywall over the inside of the garage door, but they leave the garage door on.
Correct.
So
On
it
the
looks
exterior.
like you've got a garage. You see that all the time.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all of our questions for today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Okay.
We really
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome.